1, 2, 3.
Welcome back to Defining Moments podcast. My name is Wong Lam, and today is very special because I have the absolute honor and the privilege to introduce you to my great friend, Matt Bennett. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, great to be here, Wong.
Absolutely. Before we get started, if you don't mind saying a prayer and bless this podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great. Father, we do thank you for all your many blessings in our life. We thank you that your face shines upon us and you bless us with your love, your grace, and your mercy. And so, Father, today, as we discuss our lives and defining moments within our life, I pray that you will touch not only us, but you'll touch the people that would be listening to this podcast. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, sir. Before we get started, Mark and I wrote you a little note that's just for your own personal consumption, not out loud.
Thank you so much. And you're amazing too.
I appreciate it. And this.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this. Maybe the reason I've been looking forward to this podcast is to receive one of these hats. So that is fantastic. Thank you so much.
And we try to go with the Atlanta Braves color. So
I like it.
It's
Chop House.
Different. Yeah, there you go.
Atlanta, the big ATL.
Yeah.
Chop House.
Yep. There you go.
I was looking forward to this season. It was their year. And
still could be a shortened year.
Could be a shortened year.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I understand.
Oh.
And this is also for you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. A Defining Moments coffee mug. And I'll definitely use that on a daily basis. So thank you.
Yeah. A background for our listeners and our viewers that how I know you is I used to coach your son, Austin, who recently got married. And I always thought, man, the test of a true friendship will be after I stop coaching. And you are the true essential of a friend. I remember in 2012, I was going through some personal issues, and you were pretty much the third one besides my mom and dad. And then you came over to my house. You allowed me to cry. We prayed together, and I am forever indebted to you for your friendship. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for saying that. And, you know, I see friendships as a gift, not something to be used or something to be used as tools in our lives to get us to a next place. And so when God brings along a person like you or any type of friendship, I value that. And I want to put value back into the person. So.
Right. No, I appreciate it. And you also made Mark and I official in 2018.
That's right. I had, just like you said, it was right here in this room where you probably had one of your most devastating moments of your life.
Yeah.
And I'm honored to have been there for you during that time. But then I got to see one of the happiest days of your life too.
Yeah.
And that was to officiate your marriage. And what a wonderful privilege. And so thank you for giving me that honor.
Yeah, absolutely. How's your day going so far?
It's going great. Actually, I met with another friend this morning.
Okay.
And it's one of those friendships that just kind of occurred. I was in Charleston talking to some friends of mine from Cuba. And the next thing I know, this gentleman was standing next to me and said, "Hey, did y'all say something about Cuba?" And I was like, "These are my friends. They're from Havana, and they're here visiting." And he starts talking, and it turns out that he's like, "I gotta get together with you. I've got to introduce you to my wife. I'd love to meet your wife." And so that was last summer, and over the last 6 or 7 months, we've gotten together for dinner on many occasions. He owns Precision Auto Tune here in Oklahoma. So he owns, I believe, 10 stores here in the Oklahoma area. And, so we just get together and talk about life and, talk about his business. And, it's just had a wonderful morning already.
That's awesome. Mrs. Bennett doing well?
She's doing well. She started a new adventure. She had a salaried position in communications at a nonprofit organization. And in January, before all this COVID stuff started, she felt the need to start her own business and help nonprofits and help businesses communicate their story more effectively. And so she launched out in January. Little did we know that a lot of businesses were going to be in turmoil, but she's been blessed. I mean, she's been busy every single day. She's developed websites. She's helped people with podcasts. She's a project manager for one of the larger churches here in Oklahoma City called the Gate Church.
Wow.
And so she's been really super, super busy. And so I'm very proud of her.
Yeah. Yeah. And Brooklyn, she's still in school or in college. How's that working out right now?
Yeah. So she was at ORU.
Yeah.
And she went till the beginning of March as just a regular student. But then when she came home for spring break, they transitioned to online school. And I would say that ORU, along with all the other schools, it was a very difficult transition for everyone because you're halfway through a semester as an in-class, face-to-face class, and then you're having to transition to online, and they just weren't prepared. No one was prepared for it. Yeah. But now she's finished her classes, and she's going to be working this summer. She nannies. She takes care of kids in the summers to make a little bit of money, and so she's actually has an interview here in Moore tomorrow with a family.
Herself, or are you driving her down?
She'll drive herself. Okay. She had a family that she normally works for in Piedmont, but they have decided that the mother is going to quit her job and stay home for the summer. So she was kind of scrambling this week, trying to figure out, okay, now what do I do? Yeah. And she had a family here contact her, and so she's coming down for a family interview. So it's 3 kids and 4 dogs.
Wow.
So
3 kids, more dogs than kids.
But she's looking forward to it. She loves working with kids. She even at ORU, she's been blessed because she takes care of 3 kids in the Tulsa area. Yeah. And some of the kids are, challenged, and so, but she loves kids. She loves taking care of kids, and she's a very responsible 20-year-old. So I've got 2 great kids. My son, he graduated from Oklahoma State University last May in aerospace engineering and mechanical engineering, and got a job first at Textron up in Wichita. They did some layoffs back in November of last year. Right. So he got laid off, being one of the last ones they hired. Yeah. And he was devastated. The first day, he was just called me. He was devastated. And I told him, son, it's going to work out for the best. And it actually did. He got a great severance with Textron. He didn't work January, February, March, and then got a job he had already got a job at Boeing here in Oklahoma City. And so he's loving it. Yeah. And working from home, actually. Yeah. Because he started right in the midst of all this, the COVID-19. Yeah. And he got married recently. And how did all this transpire? Yeah. Because I saw the tweets. And I'm like, this is going to be interesting. So he, when he was in high school, he was going to Francis Tuttle Engineering Academy, which I would say if you have a child that's interested in engineering or even in medicine, please get them into an academy situation. They go half day to school, and the other half day they go to Francis Tuttle or they go to some academy, and they learn from engineers. And so while he was doing those 3 years of high school in the engineering academy at Francis Tuttle, he met a young lady from Edmond. And she was interested in architectural engineering. And so they were just friends. They went to OSU together. And the first year they were still friends. They started dating, I think, the second year. And so they decided to get married last year. And they were hoping to get married May the 24th, I believe. Yeah. And with everything shut down, the venues were not allowing weddings to be taken place in the venues. So they came to me and was talking to me, what do you think? And I said, listen, if you want to get married, let's just get married. Let's do the officiating. Let's just have a small private wedding in our backyard. And so they thought that was a great idea. So they went to get the marriage license, and nowhere in Oklahoma City could you get a marriage license because it was a non-essential function. And so they called me and said, we can't get married because we can't get a marriage license. And so I've been I watch you and your tweets and defining moments, and I know that Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell is a follower of yours, and so I sent him a private tweet, and also I tweeted something about it and tagged him. And immediately, one of his staff members contacted me and said he would look into the matter. And within a couple of hours, his staff member contacted me back and said, there's 2 places in the state of Oklahoma that you can get a marriage certificate. One was in Tulsa, and one was here in Norman. And so they went up to Tulsa the next morning and got their marriage certificate and got married in our backyard that weekend. And so they lived in her apartment until they were able to move in to their new apartment downtown in Deep Douche, near Bricktown.
Nice.
So they're loving it. They're loving this downtime, the lockdown, because she's not working, he's working from home, and so they weren't able to go on a honeymoon. They weren't able to go on a nice vacation. They had planned to go to Europe and see Europe, but they're enjoying being together. Yeah. So
it'll be like a delayed honeymoon.
That's right. They're hoping to go in November, and she's an architectural engineer, so she will actually start in June at her employment here in Oklahoma City.
That's awesome. She'll be fascinated with your being architectural engineering because there's so much, just amazing buildings. But why am I telling you this? You lived in England.
That's right. I love England. I love London. I love Europe. So it's a fascinating place.
Yeah. Take us through your own journey, Mr. Bennett, or Matt Bennett. It's so weird to call you Matt.
Yes.
So take us through your own journey of how did you become an ordained minister? What got you into religion?
Well, I grew up in a small church in rural northeast Georgia. I grew up on a farm, and I actually had, I'm not even sure if you're aware of this, but I had a speech impediment when I was a kid. When I first went to first grade, the teachers came to my mom and said, we can't understand him. His stuttering was so bad. He had a speech impediment. And so I started going to speech therapy even before I went to first grade. But I went to speech therapy for 4, 5, 6 years in my elementary school years, and never dreamed that I would be doing what I do, speaking and communicating with people around the world. But I grew up. I had my desire was to make a lot of money, and so looking into that was to be an engineer. And growing up in a rural public school system in Franklin County, those I don't even know if I knew or understood what engineering was all about. But I applied to Georgia Tech, which is a fantastic engineering school in electrical engineering, and was accepted. And so I went out to Georgia Tech and started classes out there, and was just completely lost. I mean, completely lost from a standpoint of academics, but also completely lost in the terms of just living in an urban setting. Mm-hmm. This rural country boy put into the heart of Atlanta, Georgia. If you've ever been to Georgia Tech, it's right in downtown. Yeah. And my roommate, I was a freshman, but my roommate was a 5th-year senior from Long Island, New York. And so not only did he make fun of me because I was a Southern redneck, but he made fun of me because of the music I like to listen to. He made fun of me because I was a Christian and I did devotions every night. And so almost every conversation ended in some type of argument. And so after about one semester, I decided to I had come home on the weekends, and I used to play basketball with my pastor on Sunday afternoons. And so we were playing, and one day he said, "Matt, have you ever thought about being a pastor? Have you ever thought about being a minister?" And I said, and I started laughing at him. I said, "There is never not a chance in a million years am I going to be a pastor? Am I going to be a minister?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you come back to Emmanuel College, a small Christian college in my hometown, and why don't you come back and just see what God might do?" And I said, "Okay." So I transferred to Emmanuel College. I got into some ministry groups where we would travel and sing at different churches, about 50 different churches per year. In the summer times, I started going on mission trips down to Mexico, and went to, in 1990, I actually went to the World Cup soccer tournament in Rome, Italy.
Wow.
On a ministry team where we actually did drama performances on the streets, in the plazas, outside of the venues. And so you have, hundreds or thousands of people watching you do these little skits, these Christian skits. And so we lived in tents. We actually stayed in tents for 3 weeks there in Rome, Italy, out in the park. And so fantastic experience. But when I came back from the Rome trip, we went to Rome for 3 weeks, and then we went to London, England for 6 weeks. And by the end of those 6 weeks in London, I just knew that Europe was where I needed to be. Mm. And I just loved it. I loved the culture. I loved the history. I loved the just how they did life in general. So I came back to university, finished up. During that time, I had already met a young lady there at the university, and she was going on to University of Georgia to finish her business degree, Janese. Yeah. And so we finished, she finished her 2 years. So at 20 years old, I can't believe that we got married at 22 and 20, but we got married, and she went on to University of Georgia, finished up her degree. She finished in June of 1993, and we were in London, England in July of that year. And that's where our journey began. Yeah. I worked at a Bible school. She was the administrator. I was the dean of students. And we lived there for 2 years with students. And I think that's where I fell in love with different cultures around the world, because we had students from the Philippines or from Korea or India, Africa, Latin America, that came from all over the world. And we normally had 15 students living with us at one time. And so we were kind of like house parents to those students. And so for 2 years, we lived with those, and it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. Yeah. It was the best of times because we were just living together in a community, learning so much from people. It's the worst of times because when you have 15 cultures living together in one house, can you imagine what it creates conflict, let's just say. And but it was the best of times also. And just loved London. And then we came home. I got my master's degree from Regent University in Missiology and cross-cultural communications. And then we went back in 1999, and we stayed for additional 6 years in London while I worked with the Muslim population. There's a lot of refugees coming out of the Middle East, especially the nation of Turkey. Mm-hmm. And so we had a ministry to help those refugees, mostly economic refugees. There were some religious refugees coming out of Turkey, but mostly economic refugees coming. A lot of them didn't know English. They didn't know how to count to 10. And so when they got junk mail in their home, or if they needed to go to the doctor, if they needed to go to a appointment with a school teacher, they didn't know how to communicate with those people, or they couldn't read their mail. So they would come to us. We had on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we opened up our church, and people would come and they'd bring their mail, and we would read it to them. If it was the gas company was about to turn their gas off, we'd call the gas company, and we'd talk to them and get their bills paid. And if they needed someone to go with them with an appointment to a doctor's appointment, we would go and help them with that. And it was amazing. We got calls all the time. In the middle of the night, so-and-so was in a car accident and was at the emergency room, and could you go down there and communicate, with the doctors? So fascinating time. And then we came back here to Oklahoma City in 2006 to run a humanitarian organization.
Yeah. Wow. How's the transition like from 15 different cultures in one room all the way back here to the United States for you? That was, it's called reverse culture shock.
Okay. And there is actually a term for that, and it's called reverse culture shock. So when you go out and you live in a different culture like England, or even though you think, well, it's the same culture, it's really not the same culture. And so you get accustomed to living in that type of environment. And then you come back to the United States where everything is like cookie cutter. Everything's the same. People want you to act the way that they act, where in London, they're more accustomed to other cultures living around them, and they expect everybody to kind of have their different preferences or opinions, and there's more discussion. And you come back to the United States, and everybody wants you to believe exactly the way they believe. They want you to have the same political opinions. They want you to have the same thoughts on a discussion. And so it was very, very difficult because I was used to having discussion, right? Yeah. And so you come back here and you're talking to a friend, and all of a sudden now you're having a discussion with him instead of agreeing with him. And those friends, what you thought were friends, now they don't want to discuss it with you anymore. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And so it was difficult. It was really difficult to come back here, and now I have some really good friends that have also lived overseas. And so we hang out together some, and we'll find these hole in the wall type restaurants, and we go down to different parts of towns we'll go to the Iranian restaurant, or the Jordanian restaurant, or Vietnamese restaurants. Yeah. And so we enjoy Oklahoma City has such a variety of cultures here. Yeah. And so we have enjoyed Oklahoma City because if you go out, you can find it, right? Yeah, for sure. 100%. But you have to make that attempt. Yeah. And so many people here in Oklahoma, they just go to the same store, they go to the same restaurants, they eat the same foods, and that's not our family. Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, I've always been so fascinated just by every time we talk at soccer practice, it would lead me to just think, man, I felt like Mr. Bennett lives just this incredible life, and which you do. And you understand culture. So my question is, how do you cultivate a culture? Yeah. So, I do love culture. And let me just preface this by saying I have lived a wonderful life. I tell people I've lived 3 or 4 lifetimes in the 51 years that I've lived. I've lived more, I've gone more, I've seen more than most people ever have a chance of doing that. And I'm very honored and privileged of doing that. how do you develop culture? How do you develop culture in your workplace? How do you develop culture in your family? And it's about attitude. It's about openness. It's about vulnerability. Perfect example. And this is in a Christian religious context.
Yeah.
But, if you've met my children, you understand that my children they love dialogue. They love discussion. They love to talk about things. And people always say, how did your children, they're so mature for their age. They have their own thoughts. They have their own opinions about things. And I talk to them. I say, because we've developed a culture of openness within our home. So, for example, like after church on Sunday, we'll come home and we'll have a meal together. This was when they were in the house, but we would have a meal together and we would talk about the service. We would talk about the sermon. We would talk about what the pastor had said. And, do you think that he interpreted that scripture right? Did you think that he made that example he gave, was it within the right context? Mm-hmm. And I've actually had people, guests at our house, and they hear this conversation going on, and they say, how dare you question the pastor? How dare you question that? And I said, listen, I've developed this open culture within my home.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really, really important not just to take someone's word for it, but to really study, to study, to own that information yourself, that information becomes your information. And so now I have a 21-year-old, about to be 22, and I have a 20-year-old that when they talk about religion or they talk about engineering or they talk about whatever, they have their own opinions. It's not just because somebody has told them that. It's because they own that information. And it has to do with culture. It has to do with openness and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And allowing that to happen. The attitude the posture of your attitude, I guess.
Yeah. That's really deep and insightful. And I can relate to a time when I was coaching Austin and I was moving him to a different position. I was kind of explaining to him certain things. And he's one of the very few kids that would actually well, hey, coach, I was thinking this because this is what I see. It makes sense.
Right.
And he is always so respectful, always called me coach, which is actually really cool. I actually enjoy that. And you actually call me coach.
That's right. I still do. Right.
I know.
I think that has to do with two things. I think it has to do with Southern culture, coming from Georgia, saying yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And I think it also has to do with his upbringing in Europe. So he was 2 years old when we went back to Europe. My daughter was born there. And the education that they received in just those 6 or 7 years that they lived there it was just a different type of culture, different type of education to make them process, to think differently than most American kids have the opportunity to.
Yeah.
But talking about football, soccer, he was an amazing player, and I think because he thought more like a European player than an American player, and there's a huge difference there.
Oh, it's huge. He understood what he was talking about,
right?
Instead of just I'm just going to play over there. He knew the why and the what. And playing the ball
and learning how to space the ball and spacing on the field.
Yeah,
I think Americans, because we've been so accustomed to playing American football, and we try to get the ball from point A to point B across the line, that we're always going forward. You watch any football game on Sunday, and they talk about a runner that runs downhill.
Yeah,
because he's running in straight lines to the goal line.
Right.
where soccer is totally different, right? It should be totally different because it's talking about angles and talking about spacing, and so American soccer players in general. I'm not there. There's some excellent soccer players in American
For sure.
Game now, and I think more and more are coming. Will be coming in the future. But in the past, I think what's been holding us back is that we think in straight lines, and we think about getting the ball in the back of the net, where European players play above the field and they see angles and they see spacing. So it's totally different.
No, I agree. And I'm going to just one coaching point is one of my favorite drills was you had to play 2 negative passes before you can play it forward once.
That's right.
-2, 1, -2, 1 to spread the field, to look at those angles, make it more defined and open. But anyways, we could go on and on. This is a podcast about Wongland coaching. This podcast is about Mr. Bennett. What are some moments in your life? You've probably had many of them. What are maybe 1 or 2 or 3 defining moments that kind of have shaped you in your life?
You know, I was thinking about that because I knew that question would be asked of me. And I think that probably one of the earliest defining moments when it was 2 weeks before my 10th birthday. I was 9 years old. And my father, my biological father, we were together on a farm, and there was a horrific accident, and he was killed. And so I visibly saw that. And it really had I could have gone into a place of bitterness and resentfulness and used that as a crutch through the rest of my life. Well, you just don't understand how I feel. You just don't understand what I've gone through. You just don't understand the circumstances I grew up in. You know, I could have used all those things as a crutch or as an excuse. But instead, I think I made a decision early on to use that experience to my advantage. My mother got remarried to a wonderful man, Fred Westfall. He encouraged me to go on and get my education, to go on to university, which I did, which opened up the world to me. But also, as I traveled throughout the world, and a part of my job responsibilities was to go into very difficult situations, whether it be the earthquake in Izmit, Turkey, where 90,000 people got killed, or whether it's to go into Haiti, where close to 500,000 people were killed in that earthquake in Haiti. To go into those situations and feel the pain that people felt, not to see it as some exercise or not to see it as just some job that I was doing, but really to empathize with people, to really feel their pain and feel their hurt. I think that goes all the way back to when I was 9 years old and was able to see. I had the unfortunate opportunity to see my father being killed on that farm accident. I think I'm able to identify people. And I believe that people sense that. I think people sense that, hey, this guy connects with me. He understands how I truly feel. And so I think going to Haiti and seeing that country, there's a lot of problems in Haiti, but seeing our churches or those orphanages that we were working with being rebuilt, not only did we rebuild the structures, but we were able to rebuild people's lives. And because we connected with that. And so that's probably the most defining moment of my life, choosing to be positive, choosing to see this as something that will shape me and define me, and I can be effective and successful in life because of it, or I could have used it as a crutch.
Yeah.
But I think that every day is a defining moment. Every single day is a defining moment. I think that today, when I leave here, I can get in my car, and between now and in my house, I can choose for something to define me in a negative way, or I could choose for it to define me in a positive way. And life comes at us all the time.
Yeah.
And we get to choose if we're going to define that moment or allow that moment to define us. And so I've come to realize that. And so every day I look for those small opportunities that will help shape and define my life for the rest of my life. I had a professor friend one time, he said, large doors swing on small hinges. Large doors swing on small hinges. And that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about defining moments. And those defining moments may be that conversation I had with a friend at Panera Bread this morning that could open up this huge space in my life, this into something that I couldn't even dream about today, but tomorrow or next year, it could open up a space within my life that would be a place of blessing and fulfillment and success.
Yeah.
Or maybe right here on this podcast.
Yeah.
This podcast could be the hinge that opens up another door into our life. So, yes, there's lots of defining moments.
Wow. That, number one, I couldn't even imagine being 9 years old and witnessing something so tragic and horrific. And then you taking that mindset of not using it as a crutch, but hey, I'm going to make a difference in this world. And you obviously do every time I meet you, and hearing your stories and lives that you touched, friends that you made and keep, friendships. You're the real deal. You're one of the most authentic men I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, I love people. I value you, and I want to add value to your life.
Yeah.
And I've had the privilege of traveling, and I think I've been in over 50 nations. But more importantly, I feel like I have friends in those 50 nations. And even in the last 9 weeks during COVID, I've been home. What do I do? We haven't told the audience this, but a year ago this week, I quit my job. I had a full-time job at. I was at university at Southwestern, director of graduate studies, and I just really felt that I was supposed to quit, and I did. And I had no idea. I still don't have any idea how I've made it for a year without having a job. But every day, God blesses in a different way, and I'm blessed even today because of that. But I have over the last 9 weeks, being quarantined and shelter in place, I thought, what do you do? I don't want to just be like everybody else and go on Facebook and blast the airwaves. I've gotten tired of watching Facebook Live. So I've taken the opportunity of just getting on the telephone and calling my friends in Bethlehem, calling my friends in Australia, calling my friends in Hungary, just reaching out to them and letting them know that somebody cares.
Yeah.
And it is amazing the responses that you get. Thank you for thinking about us. Yeah. Thank you for reaching out. And the other day when I made an announcement that I had gotten my real estate license, I had that friend who I'd been calling previous weeks from Bethlehem, and he just called me, FaceTimed me, and said, "Hey, I just read that you got into real estate, and I want to pray a special blessing over you."
Wow.
And then I got to feel that same joy that somebody thought enough about you in halfway around the world that they would call and bless you.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's all about. I value true friendship, and one of the most painful things, and it's actually happened just recently. I had a friend that I thought was, and I would still consider that person a friend, but they called and they made a statement, I'm not sure if I can trust you. And, that really hurt. That really hurt.
Yeah.
Because if you've known me for quite a number of years, and I value friendships. That is something that I'm very, very loyal to friends. And if I have hurt someone, or whether it's unintentionally, that's something that I wasn't hurt that he said it. I was hurt that I put myself in a situation where somebody did not feel like they could trust me. You understand what I'm saying? Whether it's something I did or something I said or something, opinion that I gave, I hurt someone else and put them in a situation where they did not feel like they could trust me. And I value friendship and loyalty to those friends.
Yeah.
It's high on my priority list.
Yeah. Did you find out why that person said that they didn't feel like they could trust you? Did you pry a little bit?
I did. But we won't go into that.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
But it basically had to do with my view of a leader.
Okay.
And my opinion about that person. And, I think it's sometimes we sometimes if we give our opinion about the leadership qualities of a person, whether good or bad, we put ourselves in a situation where people can either agree or disagree.
Right.
And there is a difference between criticizing someone or making factual statements that person did this or that person did this. And I will say that I haven't always done the right thing. We're all imperfect people in an imperfect world, and we all have our own weaknesses and faults. And while I value friendship and I value loyalty to friendship, in that I'm a person that I'm a very outspoken person, and so I can tend to be, when I'm stating facts, I can tend to be a person that can be critical, or at least it comes across from people listening to the conversation that I'm critical toward that person.
Yeah.
And that's something I work on. And I think that we all have traits and qualities within our life that we have to work on a daily basis. And that's one thing I have to do. Not to be critical of people, but actually, how can I add value to that person? How can I make the situation better instead of just being critical about it?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that we all can do and become better at, and to a certain extent try to master.
Right.
To be able to give good feedback and inject more of not our opinions, but how can we help into you?
Right. It's unhelpful just to say someone does a bad job. It's unhelpful just to say, well, that person doesn't have the skill set to do that. What is more valuable is to say, how can I help that person to become successful?
Right.
How can I equip that person or facilitate growth in that person in that area?
Yeah.
But we're all learning in that area, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. You hit on the word leadership a little bit ago. What does leadership mean to you?
I think that in the world, I think it really has a definition of positional leadership. If a person has a position of authority or a position in a company or a position within a church, and that is definitely a style of leadership, a positional leadership. But a lot of times people may or may not have the gift set or the skill set to actually lead people. I think functional leadership is actually more important. And that is people with the qualities to inspire, to challenge, to see the best in someone, and to draw that best out, right? Functional leadership, I can take a person who has a gift of leadership, and he might be gifted and he might be a leader in business, but he walk into a governmental room and into politics, and all of a sudden he rises to the occasion because he is a natural born leader, right? He's able to see not only the forest, but he's able to see the individual trees within the forest also. He can see a certain situation, but he can see the overall picture and the long-term goals and plans also. And that's truly a leader who has the ability to see within the future, what I call vision, or being a visionary person who can see within the future the opportunities that are there, but they can also see the individual in the room and what that person needs to become in order to get to that potential. A person who inspires, a person who challenges, who encourages, who equips, who empowers people. That's a leader. Positional leadership will use people, right? A positional leader will look at you and say, okay, here's all your giftings. I'm going to use Wong to get me to this place.
I see.
Right? That's not necessarily leadership. That's just a person, an opportunist.
Yeah.
You know, I see your gifting, and I'm going to use you for me to get to where I want to go. But a leader has followers, and a leader is trying to get Wong to the place of being successful.
Yeah.
And I think, at least that's in my opinion, in my life, that's the type of leader I want to be. I want to, when I go to Haiti or if I go to Nepal, it's not about what it's going to do for Matt Bennett. It's really going into those situations and saying, how can I help that pastor or that leader? How can I make him successful? And whether that's in a religious setting or whether that's in a business setting. I think one of the things that I mentioned to you is, you know, I love micro businesses and the concepts of micro businesses because I believe that people, they have a desire to be successful, but they don't have the resources to get there. Yeah. And when I go into Kenya or when I go into Uganda, any place in the world, I start putting all the pieces together, right? I see what this guy who has these giftings, if I pair them up with these resources, then he can produce this. And I've been able to help so many people start businesses. One of the great examples was in Kenya. We had a pastor who had an orphanage. He needed $400 a month to feed the children within his orphanage. And at the time, the organization I worked with, we did not have additional funding to do that. And I said, is there any way else? Is there any other way that I can invest? And he thought about it, and a couple of months later, he came back to me and he said, you know, there's another guy in this area that has greenhouses, and he's making money growing tomatoes. Yeah. And so I said, well, I think I could raise some money to build a greenhouse. And so we raised $1,500 and we built a greenhouse, and he started growing tomatoes. A few months later, we bought a drip irrigation for another $1,500, and he was able to grow more tomatoes. Somebody else in Europe saw him with this greenhouse and said, hey, I see there's a a drive there. I see there's motivation there. I see that there's a determination to help feed these children by raising tomatoes. And so they gave him, this was a nonprofit in, I think, Sweden, gave him a germination center. It has all these lights and computers and stuff, and they take seeds and it germinates like in 8 days. And you put them in these little trays like you would at Home Depot or Lowe's, and you go get your tomato plants or whatever. And so they started doing that, and they started selling those tomato plants and squash and cucumber plants to their community. And someone else saw what they were doing and said, hey, you need to start a nursery for small plants and ferns and trees and things like that. So they started doing that. Then they came back to me and said, hey, we've run out of space. Can you help us buy this farm? And so we bought a 5-acre farm. And then a couple of years later, we bought another 2 acres. And in another couple of years, we bought another 3 acres. And today, instead of $400 a month, they're probably producing $1,500 to $2,000 a month. They're taking care of all the needs of their kids in the orphanage. And they're employing, because the children can't work on the farm because of laws. And so they're able to hire people within the community that are being impacted. So I had a choice. I could have given them $400 this month, and next month they would have had their hand out again for another $400 and another $400. And in 10 years, they would have still been with their hand out asking me for resources. Or what we did was we empowered that individual.
Yeah.
We empowered him. We didn't develop a dependency, something that he had to look to us as the resource, but we empowered him with a greenhouse. We empowered him with land. We empowered him with the understanding. And today, he's helping not only himself, not only the children in the orphanage, but his entire community.
Yeah.
That, I wish, could be reduplicated throughout the world, because we would have a much healthier world. We would have a much healthier governments around the world, because people could pay taxes and pay for infrastructure. But as long as we continue just to give money, we're creating a dependency upon us that eventually, in a situation like COVID, we're not able to give those resources. And so those people are hurting today.
Wow. That's awesome. That's so well explained. You're the walking definition of functional leadership.
Well, I think we try.
It's awesome.
Well, thank you. I try, and I've had positions of leadership. A lot of times, positional leadership is tied to politics, not just governmental politics, but
workplace,
institutional politics.
Yeah.
And it's much more fulfilling to walk in functional leadership.
Yeah. You should teach class. Francis Total Academy, VOTEC.
Functional leadership.
Yeah.
101.
Junior college, collegiate level. That'd be awesome. You're talking about empowering others and not taking handouts. Well, functional leadership is doing that. And so with your experience and knowledge, Mr. Bennett, I take that class because I want to become that.
Well,
I want to become some sort of functional leader.
Well, I just want you to go with me to some, like Turkey or around the world, because I think with your skill set and your love of people, you would function very well in those in those environments. You really would. So,
okay, when things clear up next year,
all right,
and travel restrictions are, and depending on where Margaret and I are with, if we're trying to have a kid or not, then we'll work on that.
All right,
we'll work around it too. You're so positive. what makes Mr. Bennett mad? Does anything tick you off?
Yes. I probably shouldn't say it because I try to stay positive.
Well, yeah.
But the incompetence of people sometimes, I think it goes back to what we're just talking about.
Yeah.
People in positional leadership, when there's other good people who are in functional leadership that are not in those places of authority and those places of decision making. And so because of politics, people get in positions while the better suited person may never be recognized or may never have the authority to make the changes that are necessary. And I think that we could do life so much better. I think, like even here in Oklahoma City, I think that our roads should be better. Our schools can be better. We can do life so much better. And there's capable people, gifted people, skilled people, but they're not in the right place of authority to make those changes happen. I think those things we're making positive steps to that. But I think that's what frustrates me the most when I'm a type person that I want to see progress.
Yeah.
I want to see things done correctly. And I'm not in control of all those things, right? I'm not in control of the educational system. I'm not in control of the governmental structures within this city. I'm not in control of this church or that organization or that business.
Right.
And maybe I just like to be in control, but that's what frustrates me when I see things that could be clearly done better.
Yeah.
But because of whether the lack of attention or whether it's the lack of understanding or competence, it does not get done.
Incompetency. I like it. I think that's frustrating that's probably frustrating a lot for functional leaders because you're trying to empower people. And it's like, hey, let me help you. You got to help yourself. And then sometimes a lot of people, well, I'd say a lot, but there's quite a few people that are like, no, just give it to me and I'll go along with it.
Another thing that really frustrates me is the lack of understanding of culture. And, here in Oklahoma City, we have a diversity of culture.
Sure.
Yet people stay within their boundaries, within their limitations. And because of that, we can say we don't have racial prejudices against people or we're not racist. We can say that because we stay in our own little protected boundaries or our communities or people.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that we stretch those boundaries and we experience different cultures and try to understand people.
Yeah.
I worked quite a bit in Turkey and the Middle East and within Muslim cultures. And so even today, I'm very comfortable going to the mosque. I take people to the mosque a couple times a year and we view a Friday prayers and we talk to the imam and I read things about Islamic culture. I'm very comfortable in those type settings. But then I have people question me, why do you go to the mosque? Why do you talk to this person? Why are you friends with this? And it's fear, right? It's fear based on a lack of understanding of that culture. When I tell people, hey, I'm going to Turkey, I'm going to see the 7 churches of Revelation, and I'd like you to go. I have so many people that say, oh, I'm not going to a Muslim country. Why are you not going to a Muslim country?
Yeah.
These people are wonderful, hospitable, generous, kind people.
Yeah.
Right? What we see on the television with terrorists and, the jihadists, or whether it's ISIS or Al-Qaeda, this is a small percentage of the overall Muslim people throughout the world. Mm-hmm. And yet we allow the perceptions that we get from mainstream media or things we read, we allow them to direct our life one way or the other.
Yeah.
We don't get to experience Turkey, or we don't get to experience London, or we don't get to experience Tokyo based on a perception that we picked up from mainstream media.
Yeah.
Or our culture, what our culture dictates to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want people to open their mind, discover for themselves what reality is, what truth is, and experience culture.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to add on that, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So I'll take it from the Asian culture,
right?
Asian community here is really prevalent, and the majority live on the west side of Moore or northwest 23rd and Class, in that area. They call it Chinatown, Little Chinatown, something like that, Oklahoma City. Well,
the Asian district.
Asian district, that's it. And my parents moved us all the way to Moore on the east side, away from the quote unquote Asian community. And I remember my mom was talking about, well, it's just so you can build friends. It's like, build friends? But now it makes sense what they were actually trying to do is, hey, go out there and make friends. It doesn't have to just be Asian folks. It can be everyone. And it's helped me out so much. Coaching, playing competitive soccer, coaching competitive soccer, the workforce at Chesapeake.
Right.
Friends I deal with, it's like, man.
That dynamic, what you're discussing, is a dynamic that I experienced in London. So as an outsider going into London culture, I have there's an intense pressure within my own culture, inside of me, to be around Americans, right?
Yeah.
And so if I'm not careful, I will live in London, England, but surround myself with American friends.
Yeah.
Right? I saw that among the Turkish people. So Turkish people would come from Turkey. They're economic, religious, political refugees. They say they don't like the politics within Turkey, but yet they come to London and they live in the same area of town and only speak Turkish and so when a soccer game with England against Turkey, they'll root for Turkey instead of rooting for England because they become more Turkish because they're surrounded themselves with Turkish people.
Right.
And so it's really, really important to, when you go to a different culture, to assimilate within the culture and to become a part of that culture. And I think that's exactly what your mom and dad were trying to teach you and your family, is that we can't just stay Vietnamese. Yeah. We have to become American. Yeah. We have to assimilate within the culture.
Yeah. It's true. Now I think back about listening to you speak to it, it's like, man, that's impressive. Man, my parents are pretty smart people.
They are. I love your mom and dad.
Yeah.
Well, and they're very proud of you.
Yeah. I think so.
I think they are. Coming out to watch the soccer matches on rainy, hot, cold, just all types of weather, they would come out and watch you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it meant a lot to you.
Oh, looking back, I was like, man, from my playing days to my coaching days, they'd still show up. What are a couple questions that you wish people would ask Matt Bennett that no one ever asked?
What kind of question would you want me? Maybe the question I want people to ask is, what is your goal in life? Not in the sense of how much money I have in the bank, or how big my house is, or what kind of car I drive, but truly they want to know what makes you successful. What does Matt Bennett see or think is success? Because my answer would be totally different than what most people's answer would be. My answer would be, are my children happy? Are my children fulfilled? Have I experienced life? Have I experienced this world in which we've been given? Mm-hmm. Have I experienced friendships? We were talking earlier about COVID, and if you gave me a choice in a year from now, if you would tell me in a year from now, all your family would be safe, however, you're not going to have any money in the bank account. If you're not going to have any money in your retirement, you're going to lose everything, but all your family and all your friends are going to be safe. I would choose the family and friends being safe over money in a bank account. Mm-hmm. Because I believe that is what true fulfillment and true happiness is. Not possessions or material things that we acquire.
Yeah. Do you think we live in a materialistic world here?
I think we live in a consumer-driven world. Mm. Right? We live in a world that if I do this for you, I'm expecting you to give back to me.
Yeah.
And I want to live in a relational world.
Right.
Where I value you as a friend.
Yeah.
And I want you to value me as a friend.
Yeah.
I want to value my son as my son. Mm-hmm. And I want him to see me as a father.
Yeah. That's such a great point. And I'll take that with, like, let's say social media, for example. One of the first things in a conversation that I would meet someone, they're like, so how many followers do you have? What's your following like? And I was like, man, I don't know how many followers I have. And I didn't think the conversation was about followers. I thought the conversation was about meeting you, and just, you asked me a question on the podcast. And so I was going to discuss that with you. I had no idea that we were going to discuss, I've got X amount of followers, and then you're going to tell me that you have 30,000 followers.
Right.
It's like, that's never been my mentality. And I think that's one of the most frustrating things for me is the consumer driven. What can you do for me if I help you?
Right. And I think that that's not only prevalent, say like on social media, but I think churches struggle with the same thing. I'm a minister.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a tendency within the church to say, how big is your church? All right. And with the definition of how many people are coming into a building on a Sunday morning, how big is your church? I look at it totally different. Living in Europe and understanding more of a diocese type setting, where there is a geographical area for a church. Mm-hmm. And everybody that lives within that geographical area, if you're the pastor, if you're the vicar of that parish, then all of those people are your church. The people that you take care of.
Okay.
So I think that churches have a tendency to say, how big is your church? How many people come into your four walls? But I would turn it around and say, how big is your church? How many people is in the northwest quadrant of Oklahoma City? That should be your church.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That should be the people that you're shepherding. That is the people that you should be discipling.
Yeah.
That is the people that you should be caring for and watching for and adding value to. And so instead of people thinking about people coming in and you being consumer driven, right? The more people I get in, the more people can give tithes and offering, the bigger buildings I can have.
Yeah.
Right? Think of it, turn it around and make it relational. Right? How can I help these people?
I like that. And this is probably, we'll discuss this off the air, but yeah, that I've seen it where in quite a few situations it become opportunistic.
Right.
Of businesses, churches, those type of situations.
And I'm not a pastor of a church. I'm not a pastor in a local church.
Right.
But I have people that I pastor around the world.
Yeah, you do.
Right?
Yes.
So I'm in communication with people in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Australia, and other places, in Turkey, that I help, that I disciple, that I pray for, that I intercede with. And when I'm struggling, those same people will pray for me and help me. And so I may not pastor a local congregation, but I believe that I'm a pastor or a shepherd so many people around the world.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. 110%.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. What are you most proud of?
I'm probably most proud of my children for they're not only two outstanding individuals, and they've both accomplished so much, even from an educational standpoint. Yeah, they were both valedictorians of PC North. They both went on to university. And while I'm very proud of those accomplishments, that's not even what I'm most proud of. What I'm most proud of they are two wonderful individuals that they love God, they love Jesus, they love the church, and they're just outstanding individuals. If you've ever met them, you understand what I'm talking about. Yeah. And so for Janese and I, moving around and traveling overseas, and even when we lived here in Oklahoma City, I was gone 30-40% of my time. But to see how even during, even with those challenges, that these kids grew up to be the people they are. What a blessing. Yeah. What a blessing they are.
That's awesome. I can see that. Yeah. And Brooklyn, she used to be in performing arts.
Yeah, she was a dancer with Dove Dance. Yeah. We'd go to soccer, and I would pick up, most of the time, two other boys, besides my son. So there'd be three of them. Yep. All three of those individuals turned out to be valedictorians of PC North. Right. But we'd have practice on Tuesdays, on Thursdays, and then sometimes on the weekends. And we would rotate with parents, right? I would take them some, the other parents would take them some. But one day, my son said, "Dad, you're gone 30-40% of your time, but yet you're there more than any other parent." Yep. And that's not a slam on anybody else. That's not being critical of anybody else. Right. But I thought, wow, I didn't necessarily, we tried to be there when we could, but I think it's important to be there in the life of your child. And I think you being there helps with the development of in which direction they're going to go. Yeah. And if they're going to succeed in life, the type of person they're going to be. Yeah. True. So we tried to be there. Yeah.
I'll tell you something. You probably never knew this because I never told you, obviously. But I always loved it when you were at practice, because I know you rotate with 2 other parents and bring those 3 young men. But I always enjoyed when you're there because you would give me insight, you would give me tidbits. And I felt like, to a certain extent, I felt like just speaking to you validated what I'm seeing in the game and in life. And it helped me tremendously a lot. So I definitely appreciate that, Mr. Bennett.
Well,
yeah,
it was an honor to come out and to watch you and how you interacted with the kids and the young boys. And one thing I really appreciate you is that you spoke to the young men as young men, not as boys, not as children, not even a team or individuals that you just wanted to win. Mm-hmm. You wanted these young boys to become young men and to be respectful. And I thought I always admired how you inspired them. You checked their report, their grades. They had to make good grades. They had to speak to their parents with respect. Yeah. They had to be respectful on the field. Yeah. We didn't always accomplish that, right, but that's something that you put into our kids. And so I appreciate that. Thank you for pouring into the life of my son and to the other boys that I was able to be a part of their lives too.
That's awesome. That's so cool. What are a couple things that people don't really know about Matt Bennett?
I think that most people in Oklahoma City, and they see me in my, whether I'm a minister or clergy or whatever, they do not realize the life that I grew up. They don't know that I grew up on a farm, that we had a chicken house, and every morning before school, I would go down and help my dad, water the chickens or feed the chickens or whatever. And I mean, when I say a chicken house, I'm not talking about, just a few yard birds. I'm talking about 10,000, 12,000 chickens in a what we call a pullet house. And so to go down and do those things, I also had registered beagles. I'm a hunter and I'm a fisherman. So when I was a kid, I had registered Yellow Creek beagles that people would come from all over the country to buy from me because they were a certain registered Yellow Creek, and they were trial dogs. So people would purchase them from us and then take them to different type of championship shows and stuff.
Okay.
And so I think that people here in Oklahoma City, they see one type of Matt Bennett, but they don't realize that I grew up on a farm with dogs and cattle and building houses. That's one thing when I got into junior high and high school, I started working with my uncle. He was a contractor. And so learned how to build houses and do woodwork. And when I came home from London in 2005, one of the things I really wanted to do was build a house. And so my uncle helped me, my cousin, we took I drew out some plans, I drew out this house, way I wanted to look like and stuff. And so my uncle would tell me what to do in the morning. So I'd put the floor system in to this far. And then that afternoon he'd say, okay, now do this. So the next day I would do this. And then he came down and helped me put up the roof. And for about 3 weeks, they helped work on it a little bit as a crew. But the rest of it was done basically in the afternoons and on weekends. And I really, I enjoy doing that because in ministry, you work with intangibles, right? You work on people's lives. And there may be broken people. They may be people that have gone through failures and difficulties in life. And you work with them and you disciple them. But it's hard to define what you've accomplished. And so coming home after many, many years living in Europe and working with Muslims and refugees and stuff like people, in that community, to come back and to build a house from nothing to there's this beautiful house.
Wow.
Working and seeing something tangible at the end of that year was one of probably the most enjoyable things I've ever done in life.
That's awesome.
So,
dang. How does Matt Bennett want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a friend. I want to be remembered as a person who is positive, and I'm still working on that. Like I said, I can be critical. Trying to be more and more positive as I grow older. And I want to be a person who is seen as bringing value to their life, seeing the potential and helping them get there.
I like it. How's Matt Bennett deal with negativity?
That's difficult because I'm a people person. I like I walk into a room, I want to engage people. I want to speak to people. And so when people are negative toward me or negative toward something that I have done, I tend to want to try to explain why I made that decision. That's probably one thing that the older I get, the more I understand that you're always going to have people who are negative. Yeah. There are always going to be people who are critical. No matter if you're successful or you're a failure, there's going to be people who are against you. Yeah. And you just have to go on with life, and you have to make the best of life and the best of that situation and do what you feel is best. Because it doesn't matter what you decide. People will always think that you have an agenda. Yeah. And I just try to be as open and as transparent as I can, but make the right decision. Yeah. Not the decision that is the easiest, or not the decision that may even help the most people. Yeah. I think it's important that we make the right decision based on truth.
I like it. Wow, that's good. That's real good. Well, I, for one, appreciate your friendship, our relationship that we have. I love you, and I just will forever be in debt to you for everything you've done for me. And you're just an amazing man. I appreciate you so much.
Well, Wong, I really appreciate you and Margie. And I just believe that God is going to do something very, very special in your life. That where you're at right now is not your final destination, but it's just the beginning of the beginning. And as we've gone through this COVID season, something that I've really felt the Lord speaking to me is that not just to get through the season, but to maximize the season. Because it's not just about getting to the end. Right. It's about who we become as we're going through it. And I believe that over the last 9 weeks and over the next year and year and a half, however long this is going to last, I think you and Margie are going to become something that you're not right now, but a better version of who you are, a much better version, a version that is able to tackle and to confront the challenges of our societies. You're an engineer at Chesapeake, but you're so much more than just an engineer.
Yeah, I appreciate that very, very much. Contact information without your cell number. How do our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
Matt at mattcbennett.com.
Don't you have a company too?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm the president of SpiritLife Ministries. Okay. And so you can reach me at Matt at SpiritLife Men, it's MIN, like ministry, .org. Okay. SpiritLifeMen.org.
And is that a place where if people want to make or drop donations to the ministry and all that, that's where they can do it as well?
They can do that on either one of those pages. There will be details of how to give.
Okay. And I'm active on Twitter. You have a Twitter account.
I have a Twitter account. I don't even know the name of that. I guess it's Matt.
I think it's at Matt C. Bennett.
At Matt C. Bennett.
Yeah. And if it's not, I'll make sure I'll put that in the show notes.
Perfect.
Last question for you, sir. Mr. Bennett, do you approve this podcast?
I approve this podcast.
My name is Wong Lim. I definitely approve this podcast. Thank you so much, sir.
God bless you. Thank you.
Fun.